Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to do my June wrap-up. And the month of June was really great for reading. I had an amazing month. It was my birthday at the beginning of June, and then I went on a trip to Amsterdam with Scottish husband and my sister, and I've just all around had a really good month. And I read 12 books this month, which is pretty impressive for me. I don't often set TBRs, monthly TBRs or seasonal TBRs. I've tried them all and they just don't really work for me, except for this month. I actually went ahead and set a June TBR because my kind of general TBR is getting a little bit out of control. So I decided to go ahead and pull out the books that I really needed to read and the books that I really wanted to read, and I ended up reading a lot of those books off of my TBR. My TBR worked, and I'm kind of shocked. I've gone ahead and linked my June and my July TBRs down below so you can go ahead and check those out. Because 12 books is a lot of books to get through, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. So the very first book that I read this month was This Is How You Lose the Time War, and this is by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Motar. This is a sci-fi novella, and it takes place in kind of a probably quite distant future, and we have these two characters from opposing sides of the war going back in time down different kind of threads of history and changing things to affect the future. And they start leaving each other notes, initially taunting notes, and then this kind of a great respect for each other develops, and then a relationship develops as well. I really loved this book. It's very beautiful, and the writing is so lyrical and wonderful. But I had no idea what the hell was going on for half of it. But it was one of those books where I feel like that wasn't necessarily the point of it. I feel like the point of it was to kind of enjoy this beautiful writing and enjoy the development between these characters. I really ended up liking it, despite the fact that I had no idea what was going on. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend it when it comes out in July. It's a short read, but it's not necessarily a fast read. I'd say that it's definitely a book to be savored. This next book, and actually the one that comes after, I was reading at the time that I filmed my June TBR, so I didn't include those in the video because I just forgot, but they are technically on my June TBR, so I'm counting this as a victory. This is The Embers of War by Gareth L. Powell. I was initially excited about this book because I know he won the British Science Fiction Award for 2018 for this book, and I love a good space opera, and I love sentient spaceships. They're like one of my favorite things. I don't know if they're tropes, but one of my favorite things in sci-fi, and I've wanted to read more, so I was really thrilled that this book had sentient spaceships in it. And I was really surprised by the fact that this was a really rollicking, fun, good time, because sci-fi is very much a reflection of society, of our society, so you can really see what is happening in society through science fiction for the kind of years that it was published. I love science fiction for that. And obviously society is not the happiest place right now. We're kind of living in a dystopia, which sucks. So a lot of sci-fi that's being written now is very dark, is very kind of, you know, dystopian and horrible, and everything is awful. This was not like that. This was fantastically fun. I really enjoyed this book. This book follows a crew of people who come together to go on this particular mission. They'll have their various reasons for going on this mission. Basically, a kind of civilian residential ship has been shot down in disputed space, so some of the crew members, including the ship, the Trouble Dog, are there as a rescue mission. And we have a couple of other characters who are coming along as well to find a particular passenger for various reasons that we find out later. I feel like this book had a lot of shades of Star Wars, which I've not really seen in books before, so I was really thrilled about that. It's got that kind of feel of the ragtag, you know, crew of people going to do the thing and discovering, you know, more is going on along the way. And, well, it's not like Star Wars at all, I don't think. It really has that vibe, which I really liked. I really liked the kind of world building. I loved the whole concept of the sentient ships. The Trouble Dog is amazing, is my favorite character, and I really enjoyed Sal, who is the captain of the Trouble Dog, as well. I feel like some of the other characters weren't as strong. Those two were definitely the strongest for me, and this missing passenger I really enjoyed as well, although we got a little bit more about her. And I feel like the ending tied itself up a little bit too perfectly for my taste. I like it when things aren't kind of, you know, tied up neatly together in a bow. I have the second one. I've actually bought the second one. It's gonna be in my June haul. I feel like, judging from the back copy of that book, I think that that neat little bow is going to come unraveled really soon, very quickly, very easily, but it did feel a little bit too perfect to me at the time. I feel like I'm saying a lot of critical things about this book, but I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a really fun sci-fi read. It's really good for the summer because you just blast through it really quickly, and it is super fun. The next book that I read this month is one that I absolutely loved, and I talk about this book pretty extensively in my mid-year check-in video, which is linked down below, and I really, really loved this. The world building is amazing, the characters are amazing, the magic is amazing, everything about this book is amazing. I loved it so much. This is Jade City by Fonda Lee. I feel like a lot of people are reading this right now because Jade War, the second book, comes out in July, which is very, very exciting. And like, I talk about this extensively in that other video, so I'm not going to go into it again too much, but I feel like this book feels very unique in terms of modern fantasy publishing because it's not quite... We're getting a lot of kind of non-European settings, which is great, and I'm really enjoying that. But that's not the reason that it feels unique. It's got this kind of 1930s to 1950s vibe, and they have things like comic books and machine guns and motorcycles and all of this, but it still feels very, very fantasy. The economics that she puts in behind Jade, which is the kind of main export of this country, it's just incredible, and it feels so incredibly realistic. You almost feel like you're reading a, you know, a history about this particular place. It's really, really fantastic. Jade City takes place in the fictional country of Kekon, which has a kind of Hong Kong vibe to it. It's a East Asian inspired country, and it's an island nation, and the people of this country can sort of take on the powers of Jade, the stone. It gives you basically superpowers, and that's kind of the very, very basic backstory of it. We have these two rival clans, kind of like Godfather-esque gangster type families, the Mountain and the No Peak clan, and we follow the No Peak clan, and war is about to break out for a huge variety of reasons. This book is really complex and wonderful. I love the characters, I love the world building, and I need to know what happens in Jade War, which fortunately I have in my hands. If you have seen my July TBR, it's one of the books I'm definitely going to read this month. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved Jade City. It was so good, and I've been kicking myself because it's been sitting on my shelf for about 2 years, and I just never ended up picking it up until recently when a lot of people that I know have been reading it. So I would definitely say if you're in that situation, if it's on your shelf, go ahead and pick this up because it is so, so good. Another book that I read this month that I talk about in that mid-year check-in video is Atlas Alone by Emma Newman. This is the 4th book in her Planetfall series, and it's so good, and that series is amazing. I feel like I ramble about Emma Newman a lot on this channel because she's just wonderful, and I feel like she's underrated in terms of sci-fi. She writes the most wonderful characters, really complex, complicated, and very unique feeling women, and she writes a lot about mental health, and they're just so good. I can't really talk about the plot of this book because it is a direct sequel to After Atlas, which is the 2nd book in this series, and if you do decide to read these, read them in publication order for sure. But this deals with big decisions, really, really huge decisions, and how one person can kind of change the course of history almost. It's super vague, but it's well worth not having this book spoiled for you. Again, her characters are wonderful. Dee, who's the main character in this book, is kind of a side character in After Atlas, and she was phenomenal. She was wonderful. I just loved her, and again, don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but these books are so good. If you like sci-fi and you really want mental health representation, if you want really complex and wonderful characters, and if you want a really fascinating world, definitely pick this up. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really love this book. I really love all of her books. She's just great. She's really, really great. Next up, I took a little bit of a break from novels, and I read a graphic novel. I read the 9th volume of Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is an amazing, absolutely amazing science fiction series, and if you haven't picked it up yet, it's quite graphic, like really, really super graphic, but it is wonderful. It's so incredibly good. Saga follows two characters who are on opposing sides of a war, and they end up meeting through circumstance, falling in love, running away together, getting married, and having a child. And the opening of the first book is her having this child. And the books follow Hazel, who is their daughter, as she's growing up. So this is the 9th volume, so a lot of stuff has happened, so I'm not going to talk about it, but they're really, really wonderful. Definitely mature books, especially because they're graphic novels. You have a lot of the images that come with. Some of it's quite violent, some of it's very, very like sexual, if that's not something you're interested in. But I really, really enjoyed this. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait for the next one, but I don't think that they're doing a bind-up of the 10th volume for a long time, so I'm just gonna be stuck here waiting. The next book that I read is one that I was actually a little bit disappointed by, and I had really high expectations, so I think that's part of it. But I really wanted to love this, and I liked it. I feel like it was just ever so slightly underwhelming in like every single sense. This is Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. I was really, really excited for this book for a number of reasons. First of all, it's kind of, it was pitched to me as murder mystery in Hogwarts, which sounds amazing. It's also set in California, and I'm from California, and books set in California and New York, I'm total trash for. I love to read about those settings because they're places that I've lived, and I've got such good memories associated with them, even if they're super murdery. I really want to read anything set in California. And we also have a main character who's non-magical, who has to solve this mystery involving magic. So all of these things combined, I was super excited for, but it just let me down ever so slightly. I feel like the setting was interesting. I liked the fact that the school feels almost like a regular high school. It's not like a grand castle like Hogwarts is. But in that sense, it didn't really stand out in any way to me. And also I feel like in terms of the California setting, this book could have been set anywhere. It really didn't matter where it was set and what state it was set in, which made me a little bit sad, but again, that's kind of a personal thing. I also felt like the characters, so is it Ivy? I confuse Ivy and Tabitha, the two sisters. Ivy's our main character. She's our detective who cannot do magic. She's a private investigator, and her sister Tabitha is a professor at the school, and she's very magically gifted. And I really love books that have sister relationships, and I feel like we just didn't really get that relationship. It was a lot of them kind of like having this tension that never quite boiled over, and I was waiting for the moment where things would come to a head, or they would have this kind of, you know, blow up moment. And while I feel like we almost got there a couple of times, it didn't quite happen, which means that the sister relationship just wasn't hugely compelling. I liked Ivy. I thought that she was good and she was interesting, but again, she didn't quite have that last bit of oomph to her. I also thought that the mystery was a little bit kind of lackluster at the ending, and the one thing that I will say is that the resolution of this being a little bit lackluster, I think, was possibly intentional, but it just didn't end up working for me. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it, and I read it really quickly, which is not like a benchmark for me enjoying something, by the way. I feel like it sounds like it is, but it's not. I feel like this is a good summary book. I'm really interested to hear what other people think, if other people thought it was kind of underwhelming as well, but I'm a little bit disappointed in this. I really wanted more. The next book that I have is one that I unexpectedly really enjoyed. I knew I would like it. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, and I have a full video review of this book, so I will link that down below, so I'm not going to go into this a huge amount here. But this is The Wicked Fox, or Gumiho as it is called in the UK. It had a title change between the two. And this is by Kat Cho. It is a young adult modern fantasy set novel. So it's set in Seoul in South Korea, and our main character is a Gumiho, which is a 9-tailed fox of Korean legend. She's half human, half demon, and she, through certain circumstances, stumbles into the life of this boy named Ji-hoon, who is a human boy, and they end up obviously like developing a friendship and then a romance and all of the complications that come with that. I, again, talk about this pretty extensively in that video, but I'm just going to reiterate the fact that this is how YA romance should be written. It was so good, and the fact that it's not perfect, the fact that they, you know, have their troubles, the fact that they have, you know, their issues between the two of them, it was really good and it was really realistic, and I just loved it so much. I was a huge fan of Ji-hoon. Big surprise, because I usually am not a big fan of YA heroes because I feel like they're usually a little bit underwhelming because the girls really kind of take center stage. But I really like this. I really love this. So if you want to see more, I did a video review of that down below. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read another highly anticipated book for me, and I really enjoyed this one. I wasn't sure what to think at first because of a couple of themes in the book, which I'll talk about in a second, but I ended up really enjoying it. I was really surprised. This is The Kingdom by Jess Rothenberg. This comes out in July. I think it's the 11th of July in the UK, and I was really taken aback by how much I enjoyed this. I don't really love feminist dystopia. I feel like we had The Handmaid's Tale, and in a lot of ways the subgenre has not really grown from that. A lot of books feel like they are kind of imitating The Handmaid's Tale, or they're hugely inspired by The Handmaid's Tale. This was the first feminist dystopia that I've read that didn't feel like that at all, and it was great. The Kingdom is set in a big fantasy theme park, basically. Well into the future, the world has changed, a lot of species are extinct, and humanity goes to the kingdom in order to have all their wishes come true, all their dreams come true, and basically have the time of their lives. Our main character is Anna. She is one of the fantasists of the kingdom, which is basically a human-machine hybrid. She is basically a Disney princess, and she's meant to be perfect in every way. And she, as her title kind of denotes, is meant to make everyone's wildest dreams come true, which is super gross and like is just awful. But Anna is starting to change. Her programming is starting to evolve, and she's getting to notice things that she did not initially before. And at the same time, throughout this book, we also have transcripts from a murder trial, and we have evidence from a murder trial because Anna, we find out in the very beginnings, not a huge spoiler, is on trial for murdering someone, and we kind of learn what's happened throughout the book. I really enjoyed this. I really liked this a lot. I feel like it was such a wonderfully unique setting and a wonderfully unique take on feminist dystopia, and maybe it's because it has that YA twist to it, and maybe it's because it has the Disney is creepy twist to it, which, sorry Disney fans, Disney's kind of creepy. I love Disney, but it's a creepy place. But I just thought that this was so incredibly cool and unique and really well done. I will say, if you're interested in reading this, that there are heavy content warnings for really heavily implied rape. I mean, it's not even like really heavily implied. Everything is kind of off screen, and because Anna is a victim of her programming, basically, she doesn't really know what's going on to other people. But yeah, it's really heavily implied rape. There's also some animal abuse that happens in this book as well. But I thought that it was really well done. I am so looking forward to a new crop of feminist dystopia books that are not The Handmaid's Tale, because I love The Handmaid's Tale, but we want something different. I hope that this leads the way. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I might bump it up to like 4.25 or something. I just thought that it was really good and really inventive. I blew through this in a weekend, less than a weekend. It was such an incredibly compulsive and compelling read. I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed this. Next, I have a novella that came out this month that I read on my Kindle, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of those novellas, though, that I wish we had more. I really wish that we had more from. This is Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. Our main character in Silver in the Wood is a green man, which is a kind of foresty figure. I'm not entirely sure of what the whole like folklore behind green men is, but I know what green men are. And he wanders his woods and he cares for his woods, and one day the young nobleman who owns the house that's directly next to the woods kind of stumbles into his life. And it's such a incredibly sweet and wonderful romance between the two, and it's got so many kind of like shades of folklore. It feels like a folklore story that's being told to you that you'd find in like an ancient antique book. It's just a wonderful, wonderful read. I really enjoyed this one, but I do wish that we got more, especially the second half of the story. I feel like so much could have been elaborated on, and I feel like I really missed that. So the fact that I gave this 4 out of 5 stars instead of something higher is really because I wanted more. I feel like this would have been a great novel. Next up, I have one of my audiobook reads for the month. This is The Sorcerer to the Crown by Zen Cho. I've been wanting to read this for a really long time. I think it came out in 2015. It was her debut novel, and I have had this on my radar for a long time, and I ended up picking up the audiobook for this. And I would highly recommend going that route, because while I think I would have really enjoyed the book, I feel like hearing the dialogue of the characters via audio was really, really great. I'll talk about that in a second. This book takes place in, I think it's Regency, London, and our main character is Zacharias, and he is the Sorcerer Royal, kind of the highest sorcerer in England, and he is a black man. He was a freed slave. He was adopted by the previous Sorcerer Royal and kind of trained as his apprentice, and of course, this is Regency England, so racism is abound. People are not happy that there is a black man in this position, and so he has to contend with that. On the other hand, we have Prunella, who is a young woman of mixed race descent. I think she's half Indian, and she is kind of working as a quasi-servant in this school for magical girls. But of course, because this is Regency England, girls are not allowed to use magic. Only men, specifically gentlemen, are allowed to use magic. So they learn to suppress their power, and she's having none of this because she is a particularly magical person and she does not want to suppress her power. The two of them end up meeting through circumstance, and the story kind of drives on from there. And I really, really enjoyed this. I think that one of the reasons that the audiobook worked so well is that hearing the dialogue instead of reading it was really great, because they talk like they're in Pride and Prejudice. I mean, it's Regency England. And some of the social kind of norms that they're navigating, while like, say, in mortal peril, maybe would have felt a little bit silly on the page. So I, for example, say they are, you know, say this doesn't happen in the book, but say they're fighting a dragon, and like there's this whole group of like male magicians, and you know there's one female, and they're like, surely not, we cannot have a woman do magical things, and like they're literally about to die. So it feels a little bit silly in places, but I feel like, again, hearing them speak worked really, really well. I gave Sorcerer to the Crown 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this book. I really loved it. The next book I read is a little bit different from the others. This is The Van Apfel Girls Are Gone, and this is by Felicity McLean. This is a debut novel from an Australian author, and it is a kind of literary thriller. So it follows a woman named Tika, and it splits between her now as an adult and her as a child. And this particular summer, as a child, when her 3 friends, the Van Apfel sisters, disappeared. The book flashes back and forth between the effect that this disappearance has had on her. She's in, I think, her mid-30s, and the summer that this happened, the things that kind of lead up to them disappearing. And I feel like this was, maybe it's my own expectations, this was definitely more literary than thriller. I feel like it was a little bit unsatisfying in what actually happened to the girls. This is a book about Tika, it's not about the Van Apfel girls. And I feel like in a way it didn't quite satisfy that thriller craving that I had, although it was really good and it's really well written, I think, and it is really interesting. It just wasn't what I wanted. There's a lot that's kind of strange about this book. So again, it flashes to her childhood, and at the time Lindy Chamberlain was being acquitted for the murder of her daughter. This is the A Dingo's Got My Baby thing. You can look it up. And that obviously had a big impact on her, but it didn't have a huge amount to do with the actual sisters and their disappearance. It's almost like a background thing from the summer. Like, you know how you sometimes remember something really, really, really well, even though it didn't necessarily impact you in a big way, or for whatever reason it just had this huge impression on you as a child. It's kind of like that, and I feel like a lot of the focus was on that and on Tika, but not on the sisters and the girls and what happened to them. I don't know, I feel like maybe just my expectations got in the way of this. I did like it. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. I did like it and I enjoyed it. But I feel like I was hoping for something a little bit different maybe. And the last book that I read this month is Bone China by Laura Purcell. This comes out in September from Raven Books. And I was a little bit hesitant going into this because I really love The Silent Companions, which is not her debut novel, but it's the first of her kind of spooky, gothic, historical fiction books, and it's so, so incredibly good. And I did not love The Corset, which is her second of these books. They're all standalones. I really, really didn't like that, and I actually ended up DNFing that book, which is like the biggest surprise of 2018 for me, for a number of reasons that I won't go into now. But I was a little bit apprehensive about this third one because am I gonna love it as much as I love The Silent Companions? Am I gonna not enjoy it like I did The Corset? I didn't really know what was going to happen, but it turns out that I really enjoyed this one. The blurb for this book is a little bit spoilery, and I'm kind of surprised that they ended up putting that on the book, but whatever. Basically, this is split into 2 points of view between 2 different periods in time. So we have our main character in the beginning is Hester Y, and she is a young woman who's clearly got a kind of shady past that's eventually revealed to us, and she has just become a maid in this creepy house, and she is going to be looking after Mrs. Pinecroft, who is the woman who owns the house, and she's a very, very frail old woman who's possibly got some kind of dementia or something going on. But basically all she does all day is she sits in this one particular room in this house that's surrounded by china, by like plates and cutlery and all of this. And she's a very strange woman, it's a very strange house, it's very creepy. We learn a little bit about Hester's past and what's led her to this position. And we also flash backwards 40 years to Mrs. Pinecroft when she is a 20-year-old girl who's just moved to this house with her father after consumption has killed her family, the rest of her family. And I'm not going to say anything more about it because I feel like the rest is going to be weird and spoilery. So if you don't want spoilers for this book, don't read the back of it. I got what I wanted from this book and I'm so incredibly happy. I did not love The Corset because I felt like there was a lot, for example, of abuse, physical abuse, that didn't really seem to add much to the story, and it was just like, and then she got abused again, and then she got abused again, and then she got abused again, and like the supernatural goodness wasn't really there. And the reason that I read her books is because I want that supernatural goodness, and she's so incredibly good at fuzzing the lines between, is something actually going on here, or is our main character going mad? And that was what she did so well in The Silent Companions, and I feel like a lot of that really carried through to Bone China as well. I really liked the characters. I particularly liked Hester Y. She is far from a perfect person, and I found her really, really compelling. I really enjoyed reading her point of view. Hester's point of view is told in first person, and Miss Pinecroft's point of view is told in the third person, and I feel like I really, really enjoyed them both, but I particularly liked Hester's. I feel like this is one of those books, and I feel like I'm always shortchanging you guys when I say this, but I feel like this is one of those books you should really go in knowing as little as possible, but I really, really enjoyed it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, although I might end up changing that. I'm not 100% sure. I literally just finished this book, so I'm still thinking about it. So those are all the books that I read in the month of June. I had an amazing reading month, and I really, for the most part, liked everything that I read. I think the lowest was 3 stars that I gave. So like, we had a 5-star book, we had a lot of 4s and 4.5s, like it was an excellent reading month, and I'm so happy. I hope this continues on through July. In the comments below, I would love to know if you have read any of these books and what you thought on them, and what you read in the month of June. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.